You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate making Locked On Cougs your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. This is a hot topic in the Ainsworth household this evening. Do you like stuff in your queso? Do you like just like cheese, rotel, and that's it? Do you like other stuff in your queso? Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We got more on that later and a lot on the Cougs right now. A lot of portal additions. We're going to break down each and every one of them over the course of the episode today. The new ones from the weekend, that is. Obviously, we had episodes last week on a handful of guys that joined last week. But first and foremost, Houston hired a defense coordinator, I guess, officially on Saturday. The news leaked on Friday as he was telling his former teammates, or his former team, I should say. Austin Armstrong of Florida have the same position in Houston as he did there. That is the defensive coordinator. Now, Austin Armstrong comes from 2 years at Florida, preceded by 2 years at Southern Miss. There was a month or so at Alabama where he was on staff for Nick Saban in there as well. He had coaching stops at University of Louisiana and Georgia and West Georgia along the way. So big name coaches he worked under on his resume, the Kirby Smarts and Nick Sabans of the world. And that, for what it's worth, that 1 month at Alabama, well, only a month. Nick Saban, after coaching against Austin Armstrong when he was at Southern Miss, because, you know, those SEC teams play a lot of like group of five teams throughout this season. They have like 4 or 5 games a year, group 5 teams, and then they also play Mississippi State, which is just bonkers. Anyway, Austin Armstrong did such a good job coaching against Nick Saban, and then Nick hired him on staff. He was like, hey, I got a quality control position. We got to bring you on. And he brought him on like that. And really, Armstrong left that a month into the job. I guess technically it was 5 weeks in the job because he got the defensive coordinator at Florida for Billy Napier. He's like, I just got an SEC defensive coordinator job. I got to get out of here, right? And he played Division III football a long time ago at a small school in Alabama. You probably never heard of, but he gets to Florida under Napier, who worked with him at University of Louisiana, and Napier's like, I got to have this guy. He brings him in, replaces a defense coordinator that had just gone to the pros, and kind of gave him the keys to the defense. And then that relationship kind of soured at some point during the course of the first year. Napier kind of undercut him in 2024, brought in like his good old boy kind of guy, a much older Ron Roberts as his co-defense coordinator. And Roberts had already been let go at Baylor and Auburn. Not a good look at all, but he undercuts him and brings him in. And story on the street is, if you ask message boards folks and stuff like that at Florida, it looks like that Ron Roberts was the one who was calling the plays last year when the defense was not so great. But that was kind of like the no that led to Armstrong looking elsewhere, comes to Houston for a chance to be the defensive coordinator and call plays and work for another classic, potentially depends on it Houston, I guess, but all-time winner and legend in Willie Fritz. And it's interesting to see how his career has bounced from legendary coach to legendary coach along the way. When you factor in the fact that he is so young. Austin Armstrong is like the wonderkind kind of guy in a lot of ways. He was born in 1993. You heard that correctly. He was born in 1993. For reference, that is 4 years after Andre Ware won the Heisman at Houston. He's a young guy, 31 years old. And again, he's got this wonderkind kind of spirit around him in coaching circles. Now, when he is coming to Houston, his things that he's known for as defensive coordinator are being aggressive. At Southern Miss, he had Southern Miss in the top 10 nationally in blitz percentages, meaning times that they send extra rushers in all of college football. That was a key to their success there. Blitzed a lot at Florida. They're not quite as much. Had good athletes, right? Didn't need it, so they forced the rush that way. And it's interesting because when you hear him talk about his scheme, and I've only looked at some Florida tape because I was at a bunch of portal guys to break down right up throughout it over the weekend. in my own basketball tournament to coach in, it looks like it's a lot of complex stuff, a lot of misdirection here, covering up coverage there, showing this, then doing that kind of things. And he openly talks about his scheme being complex for outsiders, but the way they teach it, he argues, is that it's really you focus on what you show and then you focus on what you do. And, as long as players can, negotiate those two things in their mind, they do pretty well. He had a couple quotes here along the way, looking at older stuff of his when he first got hired at Florida. And I'm sure he'll say similar things in his introductory press conference at Houston. But one thing I thought that spoke to the complexity of his defense was that he doesn't have a toolbox, he's a tool shed, right? He's got a lot of different options. He talks about having multiple fronts and multiple coverages, and that's really, really complex when you think about it from a coaching perspective. You have a lot of people that are, base coverage teams with multiple fronts to kind of throw off the offensive line does, get a good pass rush, but you want to stay solid in the back half. You have a lot of coaches that will have multiple coverages and a solid base up front because you want to throw off what the quarterback's doing, whatever. Intentionally advocating for combining both multiple fronts and multiple coverages requires an intelligent defense, first of all. And I think that he feels like he's coming to a defense where they were pretty good last year. And frankly, what they did last year was pretty complex as well. It wasn't quite this level of complexity, but I think he understands what he's coming into. That was a good defense last year. And frankly, had the defense had offensive support, it might have been even higher than 26th nationally in terms of total defense. And he also understands he's coming into Houston, where Houston gets Corey Platt back next year. They just had Jeremiah Wilson say he's coming back. He's not going to enter the transfer portal. You said to get 3 potential pro DBs. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff happening here on the defense side of the ball in his favor, right? And so I think he understands that that tool shed he speaks of having is an important thing to have. You're going to out scheme people. You're going to have a lot of different tricks and things like that because you have veteran, smart, savvy football players. The other thing I think that speaks to his coaching style that I saw him quoted as saying is that we're going to negotiate with a hammer, meaning offense and defense talk about who dictates what and what side of the ball dictates the other, and he's showing up with a hammer. And that speaks to the blitzing he does. Even on non-blitzing downs, I felt like in looking at the couple games I got to watch, I watched some good defensive film of Florida. I guess I didn't watch the times they got beat. I was trying to find the things that he did well. But it looked like to me that even on the non-blitzing downs, they were constantly twisting or stunting. And they just say that defensive linemen are misdirecting and setting picks for one another kind of plays to kind of free guys up. It's just overly aggressive, right? And frankly, while that is a big gamble every time you do that, I think it speaks to the confidence the young guy has, right? I mean, this guy's younger than I am. He's got an impressive resume for that. But I think it also speaks to the kind of trust he has in his kids on the field. You don't run an aggressive defense if you're worried about a kid getting beat, right? You don't send a mass blitz if you're worried about a kid getting beat on 1-1 fade ball. You trust your corner, right? And so I think that that's kind of speaking to what he's doing here. And for what it's worth, Willie is a defensive guy. If Willie signed off on this, I think we need to trust it. Willie's done some pretty good hiring as of late. And frankly, he brought in Sheil Wood when he was trying to find a defense coordinator before, right? And I think that the combination of Willie and Austin Armstrong, what you're going to see here, is a lot of growth. Year one under Sheil Wood was better, I think, than anyone could have imagined. I knew it was going to be good defense. Even I didn't have them being as good as they were, right? Year one under Austin Armstrong, it could be a growth experience kind of thing. But the young sponge wonderkin kind of guy, you're going to see how does that growth go from year 1 to 2? Again, he's had a strong career. So again, D3 football player at Huntington College. I don't know if you ever heard of him or not. But he went GAGA, quality control, linebacker, DC, in a span of 4 years. Kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 years. This guy moves up the charts, and then he spent a couple years at Southern Miss, a couple years at Florida, and is now at Houston. Now, I see some people are upset about the idea of a constant climber. I think we have an elder statesman at the head coaching spot, and you bring in his buddy at the offensive coordinator spot. I think you can live with one of the three being that climber guy. I also have to say that if he's going to climb and set a record-setting kind of defense at Houston to help prepare him for the next stop, I'll use me for that. That's fine. we can live with that. Now, bringing in a defensive coordinator would, in a normal pre-NIL, pre-transfer portal kind of world, be the biggest news of the weekend. But Houston also managed to add in a bunch of new players. I want to talk about them in a second. But before we get to all of that, I also need to tell you about our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And get ready to tackle the NFL action, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and win $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets all in one place. So when you get the hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can start with $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.